Go ahead.
Okay, my name is John Holter. I'm a Navy veteran. I went in 1971 to 1975. I'm originally from Oslo, Minnesota. I currently live in Warren, have been there for a little over 45 years now, I think it is. And after my Navy time, I joined the post office, so I've had a fairly long federal career. I was in college at the time when they had the one of the drafts in 1968 or 69, and my lucky number was 50. And everybody between 0 and 125 were just about guaranteed to be drafted. My father had been in the Navy in World War II, so hearing his experiences and what he did, he said the Navy was a good spot for him. And so I went to Thief River, and after my draft number was called, and I enlisted in the Navy, and it was under the 6-month deferment program, so you had a little time to kind of get things squared away and ready for your Navy time. And was called up in May and went to San Diego for basic training. And
Where were you inducted at?
Fargo.
You took your oath right there? Fargo? Okay.
Yep.
How'd you get to San Diego?
We flew out of Fargo.
Okay.
And flew into San Francisco first, and then what they call the puddle jumper down to San Diego. And got there and was put in company 156, and we had a good bunch of guys, so we got a fair amount of privileges, you know, compared with the other companies that you were kind of competing against. And things went really well. And after basic training, I had
Well, let's go back to let's stay in basic training here for a little bit.
Sure.
Tell me a day in the Navy in basic training. What's it like?
Okay, we would get up about 5 o'clock, and depending on your performances that your company did compared to the other ones would kind of determine your line in the chow hall in the morning. So if things had gone well, you were some of the first ones to eat. And then we got out of that. They did have two sections of basic training. R&O, which was called recruit and orientation, and that was for about a month. And that's where you were got your clothes, filled out all of your forms, did your vaccinations, got all of your basic things done that you were required to have. And then you went over to the advanced side, and that's where you finished receiving your basic Navy drill and chain of command and rank rating information.
Did you know anybody from your hometown or from the area?
Everybody in the company was completely strangers to me. I didn't know anybody at all. So
Okay.
there were a few Minnesota guys, and our chief, who was a company commander, as they called him, he was also from Minnesota. So if you were from this state, you got preferential treatment. They kind of cut you a little more slack right off the bat than if you were from the South or some other places like that.
Nothing wrong with that.
Pardon?
Nothing wrong with that.
No, and I guess my thinking is that the work ethic that Midwestern or upper Midwest people had was the reason for that. And we tried not to disappoint, of course, and so we went that way. So anyway, after we went to the advanced section, we learned all that, and then at the end of July it was completion time, so we had our graduation ceremony, and I think they gave us 2 weeks leave from there. And then
After basic training, you got 2 weeks leave. Did you come home?
Yep, yes, I came home. Actually got married while I was home, and they first tried to talk you out of it, but when they said, well, how old are you? And I said, well, I'm 23. Oh, well, how much school do you have? I said, well, I graduated from college. Oh, and how long have you known this gal? I said, about a year and a half. Yeah, go ahead.
Who's asking you that?
Counselors or, you
In
know.
the Navy?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because they had apparently a lot of cases where everybody's pretty lonely after 3-4 months of basic training and go home and make some rash decisions and end up regretting it, you know, eventually. So anyway, after we went through that, things were all good and fine. So before we finished or graduated, we had taken our basic battery of aptitude and all sorts of psychological intelligence testings and things, tests like that. And then you were assigned either to the fleet or to an A school, as they call it. And that's depending on what field you were in, for me it was about a 3-month training course. And that was for yeoman, which is a Navy term for clerical work. So after I went home, we got hooked up, hitched, and then we came back to San Diego, and class was on the same base that the basic training was on, so we kind of knew our way around that way.
Okay.
And that was a 3-month training class. And then,
And that was still in San Diego now?
I was still in San Diego, right?
And now your wife is with you?
Yes, yes. And we lived just a little ways off of base, so we I had been friends with another guy in basic training, and then our wives kind of connected together, and so we found places close to each other and made it pretty easy that way. But anyway, toward the end of the A school, everybody was kind of anxious to find out what their orders were going to be. And one day they came in, and the chief we had instructing our class was a very good guy. He didn't try to push anybody around or anything like that, but anyway, he held up, he said, "I got your orders, guys." And so everybody's just kind of sitting there wondering what's going to happen. And we had put in, I think, 3 different choices.
We had a choice.
Well,
Well,
they gave you 3. I had put in for San Diego, Washington, and Honolulu, Hawaii. Just as a long shot in the dark. So when the chief came to mind, he said, "Gentleman Holter, do you like hula girls?" I knew right away. So that was my duty station. Didn't know just what I was going to do or just where it was going to be, because there's...
Oh darn, huh?
At that time when I got there were 24 different military establishments on the island of Oahu. You know, Pearl Harbor was, of course, the primary and the big one, but you know, all dotted all over the place. They had these. You had no idea where you're going to end up. So anyway, after that we got sent over. I went over first to find a spot, get a house and car, vehicle, whatever we had to do. And when I first got assigned to CINCPAC, which is Commander-in-Chief Pacific, and also there on the island you have CINCPAC Fleet, which is the Commander-in-Chief Pacific Fleet. You have CINCPAC AF, Commander-in-Chief Pacific Air Forces. CINCUS RPAC, Commander-in-Chief U.S. Army Pacific, and FMFPAC, Fleet Marine Force Pacific. All of these are headed by 4-star flag officers, and they all report to CINCPAC. Chain of command goes up like that. Well, anyway, I was assigned to CINCPAC and awaiting my clearances, security clearances, because it was in the intel field that they wanted to put me in. So I was assigned to a document library, and we were waiting there until these clearances were completed. I heard people when I did get back out of the Navy, they said, yeah, we had these FBI guys around here asking about you and all kinds of questions and so forth. And anyway, I was given a clearance and then moved from the document library and then down to the Target Intelligence Division. And at that time,
What would that be, John? Target intelligence?
Target Intelligence, yep.
What's that involve?
That was a lot of satellite surveillance, SR-71 flyover surveillance, any type of intelligence gathering that they were able to do. They used that to evaluate the bombing success or misses that the...
So you're surveilling Vietnam at the time?
Oh, this is Vietnam, yes, I'm sorry, all of Vietnam. So, by the time my first basic security clearance came back, Linebacker 1, or just linebacker air operations had already been completed. So, later that year, and around Christmas time of 1972, that's when Linebacker 2 kicked in, and that was President Nixon's effort to bring the peace negotiations back to the Paris Agreement, get that going, and it was kind of a little, you might say, strong-arm tactic to do that, but that was around the clock. In 24 hours, lights were on all day long. That went on for about 10 days, maybe 2 weeks total. And then finally the campaign was over, and then they went back to the peace table and started to hammer out the details. And then by 73, then we were on the way out of Vietnam. So, and that was probably one of the more interesting or busy times that we had after the U.S. involvement and the direct fighting was taken away from U.S. forces. Our shop then kind of revamped its focus, and what we did nuclear intel on the Soviet Union and Red China. Almost every little whistle stop, you might say, had what they call a BE number, basic encyclopedia number, and that number had corresponding information about what kind of a nuclear device or bomb would be used for that, if it was air burst or surface burst, or how big, delivered by plane or missile, whatever. So that was kind of our main activity then after the war had basically...
Like, that had to be kind of interesting.
Oh, it was very, very. Those listings for either Soviet Union or Red China was a tablet about this long, like a legal paper, and the books were approximately that thick with maybe 30 or 40 entries on a page. So you can imagine how many sites that they had, and they were constantly being updated by satellite photography or flyovers from U-2s, SR-71s.
U-2 Blackbird?
The 71 is the Blackbird, but U-2 is what Francis Gary Powers got shot down in 1962 over the Soviet Union. They still did a few of those, but most of it was by that. And primarily, I'd say almost, well, just a shot in the dark, maybe 80% were satellite photos that we would work on. And they would look at that and or look at a picture of an installation and say, oh, looks like they've got this kind of thing. The photo interp guys would pick out whatever, and then we'd process that and put it into the updated CCTL, Sync Back and Consolidated Target List. So that's what would be used if a nuclear confrontation ever would develop. So,
It wouldn't take long.
so anyway, that involved some very high clearances that you had to have to handle that material and those photographs and the information that came from that. So that was
How long were you in Hawaii?
Pardon?
How long were you? Did you spend your whole tour in Hawaii?
3.5 years. I was up for rotation after 2, and I petitioned for an extension to fill out my 4, and they gave it to me, so I stayed right where I was for the 3.5 years that we were in Hawaii.
What'd your folks think of being in the service?
Of course, with the war going on, there was always that apprehension about where you'd end up and what would happen. I think they had kind of mixed feelings going to Hawaii, meaning we would be not around or close by, but then again too, it was fairly safe considering it could have been Da Nang or Chulai or wherever.
It'd be a place for them to come visit too, wouldn't it?
They did. Both my in-laws and my folks. And it was another, oftentimes we'd get a phone call, oh, this is so-and-so from home. I'd say, we're here on vacation. Could you take us around? So we would take our friends and people that we knew from home, show them around, and then we usually got a free dinner out of the deal. So it turned out pretty good that way.
Did you live off base then, or
Yes.
what were the living conditions like?
I take that, when we first got there, we were off base, and then in 1973, I made second class, or E5. So if you were E5, then you were eligible for Navy housing. So I put in for that, and as luck would have it, there was a opening in a brand new housing development, just I'd say maybe 1.5 miles from the base. So here we moved into a completely new, unused house, and not that far from the base. And my wife worked at subbase and procurement for the Navy Exchange. So she went one way, I went the other. So it worked out pretty good that way.
Did you have any kids then, or?
We didn't have any at that time. We wanted to wait until we got out, things got settled. We didn't know just what was going to happen, of course. If I get transferred here or there, who knows what would happen. So we decided we'd just hold off until we were done.
So during your Navy career, how was the food?
Navy food is top shelf. I remember the first meal we went to in basic training. We walked into this huge mess hall, and they had, I'd say from here to your wall, just of fruit from the San Fernando Valley. You were that close to it. They had melons and grapes and oranges and peaches and apples and everything you could find, and just piles of it. Then you walked through your serving line, and they had ham, bacon, sausage, eggs, pancakes, whatever, and it was good stuff. I mean, we ate very well. I've heard from other service guys too, being within a joint command, that they'd say, yeah, Navy guys have dibs on food.
Everybody I've interviewed from the Navy, they all said food was excellent.
Yeah.
Even on the ships, they said it was good.
And if you happen to be in a submarine, they even had a higher per diem, you might say, for that. So they, instead of steak once a week, they got steak twice a week, something like that.
Yeah.
But no, food I was just really pleased with. Yes.
So what'd you do for entertainment in Hawaii? Did you do a lot of touring, or?
We, of course, you've got all kinds of beaches and things like that. It's a tourist town, of course, And so we went around. Military had established bases where you could go on for recreation and whatnot. They had a special services division that you could rent surfboards or scuba gear, whatever you wanted to do. A lot of it did focus on water things and beach like that, but also had a great deal of historical places. And I'm kind of a history buff, so we went to the Cemetery of the Pacific and the Memorial. I don't know how many trips out to the Memorial I did, because we'd take our friends and relatives that came to Hawaii, so we'd make trips out there. Now they have a bridge going across Pearl Harbor, so you can drive over there and take care of it that way. Yeah, just
Did you see a lot of GIs coming and going from Vietnam at all?
we had, in my shop, we had quite a few that had been there. Almost, I think, just about, I'd say, out of 10 guys, 8 of them had been there. So, now here's the funny thing with...
Navy or Army?
Mix. There were Air Force guys, we had some Army guys. In the admin shop itself, we had all Navy guys, but our commander was a colonel, Army colonel. And then in the different little divisions with that, they had some Air Force lieutenant colonels and some lieutenant commanders and so forth. But they had all been over there. Ironic in a way that, not having been there, I saw probably more of the country than anybody else did, because
On video.
we had pictures of every square inch, basically, of the country. So,
Pretty pocked, wasn't it? A lot of craters?
oh yeah,
What you saw must have been mostly craters.
yeah. One of the main functions was to have photographs after a bombing run, so we saw just what all the damage was, so then we could say, okay, we have to re-hit this and go back. The thing was, there, all of this stuff had to be cleared by the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Washington, so what we would get from our information, we'd recommend this, recommend that, and then have to send it on for approval, and it come back and to us, and then we'd bounce it back to Saigon or wherever it was that they'd do it that way. So it was a rather lengthy process to, select and recommend, certain targets to be hit.
So did you ever go back to Hawaii?
We have not. We've talked about it. We thought we did go back to San Diego after 20 years. We had our kids then and brought them to the base and wherever we could go. But we thought about doing it, and then we thought, well, Europe would be kind of a nice thing too. So
Somewhere you haven't been.
yeah. So anyway, we might do that. It's not out of the equation yet, but
Yep.
older we get, it's a little tougher to travel.
Well, you spent 4 years or 3.5 years there. You see probably everything there was to see.
At the time we were there, the island had about 600,000 people. And I talked to one of our church members here 3 or 4 years ago when he was there, and he said it's 1.2 million right now. So it has doubled in population. So I'm sure, in a lot of respects, things have gotten more compressed and
Sure.
did change that way.
So you came back to the States. Did you drum out then, or were you done then?
I finished my Navy time on the 10th of May, and just 10 days before that, Saigon fell. However, in your process of mustering out, you have to give up your clearances. So about 2 weeks before that, I had turned in all of my clearances and just was kind of, you have a few errands you've got to run to here and run to there, Navy housing and this and that to take care of stuff. So they give you pretty much that time then to get your things in order and get your household stuff shipped home again and everything like that. So I missed out on the last few days of the fall of Saigon, and I'm sure that would have been very fascinating had to have been there and got all the cable or read all the cables, and because every morning we'd have a stack of State Department and CIA and DIA messages to sort through and to look at. This was
It
before.
would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yes, it is. In fact, one of the very interesting things about that is, do you remember the Glomar Explorer?
No.
Okay, and I think it was 74, this ship pulls into Hawaii, and it's a freighter type boat with this huge geodesic dome in the middle of it. Looked like a huge golf ball. And the story was, that the press picked up on it, is that it was owned by Howard Hughes, and it was a research vehicle to go down and extract manganese nodules from the bottom of the ocean. And that's what was in the paper and on the news and everything like that. However, it was a monumental CIA operation where in 1968 a Soviet sub had gone down about 600-700 miles north of Oahu. Just, we've got listening devices all over the ocean, and all of a sudden they picked up these big explosions, so they were kind of able to figure out where it was, and then searching, they found this atomic Russian sub that had gone down. Well, they wanted to get as much of it as they could, so they made this ship with this undetectable equipment shroud to do that. And of course, getting all CIA and Defense Intelligence traffic and whatnot, we knew what was going on, and here the public thought it was some
Howard Hughes stunt.
yeah, and the CIA purposely used that because he was kind of a recluse and a very secretive type of person, so they figured, well, if we get behind his name, things won't be quite so suspicious like that. So the way they ran the program was very ingenious, I'd say. And anyway, as it turned out, and they did get some of the sub, they didn't get everything, but I guess they found out quite a bit that they were looking for.
A lot of intel.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Okay, so you get out, what'd you do?
Well, I got out. I had GI Bill waiting for me. So my wife had I think about a couple semesters to finish up her teaching degree. So we went back to Bemidji, and I took a few classes there while she finished up. And then when that was completed, when she was completed with that, then we moved back to here, and I went to UND and got my master's in history. So thinking I'd probably teach somewhere and do that. However, nothing was really on the job market at that point, so I saw an opening for postal employees. So I filled out an app and ended up started out in Warren, worked there for 9 years, and then the postmaster job in Oslo turned up. So I applied for that and got it, and so it was kind of a old home week coming back from after 22 years of being gone. So a lot of the names, of course, were the same, and some new ones, you know. So it worked out quite well for my post career.
Okay. Anything in your military career you want to go back on, talk about?
One operation that was very interesting was toward the end of my time there. State Department every now and then runs exercises that they get together the back room boys at the State Department, at CIA, DIA, like this, and they what they did in this one was called Kappa 74. And what the basic scenario was is that the Russians had gathered in force near the Chinese border, were separated by a river, and Chinese counterforces were meeting them there. So, I mean, that's just a hypothetical thing. So you had these, like the blue team and the green team, and okay, now green team, this is what's going to happen here. How would this team handle this scenario? And it would kind of go back and forth as to how they would predict these enemy forces acting and reacting. Interesting thing was
So
before
it's war game on paper? Is that what
that's exactly what it was. They had a wall that was probably 2 or 3 times as big as this wall, of map of that particular area of conflict, and they would, you know, have things marked off accordingly. Anyway, before things got going, they sent folders, biographical folders of all the analysts and participants. Henry Kissinger was supposed to have been there to kind of orchestrate it, but he sent his number 2 guy, this Philip Habib, his name was, and he was a big player in State Department negotiations and so forth throughout. But anyway, a lot of these analysts that came from the State Department were like a who's who of the intelligentsia. They were Yale, Harvard, Georgetown, Cambridge, and Oxford scholars, Fulbright fellows, every little grant or anything like that on the higher levels, these guys had them. No Bug Tussle University graduates at this operation here. And then at the end of that, they had all of the ambassadors from the Eastern Pacific Theater, or Western Pacific Theater. Ambassador to Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, all over. Ambassador from Red China, George Herbert Walker Bush. So here we had a future president sitting in the conference room then, listening to all these guys kind of share their thoughts and ideas about how this exercise played out. And I tell you what, you come away extremely impressed with the wit and wisdom and the sharpness of these government people.
Okay.
So it was very, very interesting that way.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So.
Anything else, John?
Oftentimes I've wondered what it would have been like had I stayed in. We both were close to family, so we decided, you know, that we would be better going back home and, you know, maintaining family ties and closeness that way. So we knew that if we had extended into a full-time military career, you know, who knows where we would.
You know that you do 2 or 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah,
You'd move every 3 or 4 years.
right, and the senior enlisted guys and officers, you know, in our shop there, they would talk, yeah, we had to move here and we moved there, we've been this place, everywhere. Interesting talking to some of the Air Force guys. They've been on every big city in the world practically. You know, they've flown all over the place. You know, you get on these C-130s and whatever, and they go all over the place. Very interesting. And Navy guys too. You know, they, you know, if you're on a ship, you're maybe in the Pacific for a tour or 2, and then you go to the Atlantic side and you got that. So.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it overall was a very good experience. I was glad to get home when the time was done, but you know, as you get older and think about it, you say, I wonder what would have happened. You know, so.
Yeah. Anything else, John?
I think that pretty well covers it. Like I say, I had the GI Bill, and that in those days, what you got per monthly payment pretty well covered your schooling expense. It wasn't that much. You didn't come out of school with a 2 or 4 year degree.
It's like $254, if I remember right.
Yeah, it was reasonable, you know. But anyway, I've got Uncle Sam to thank for my graduate degree on that account.
Okay. Well, John, I want to thank you for this interview and thank you for your service.
Well, thank you, and I thank you for yours. It